St. John's, to me, a huge winner. I mean, you look at it. The only thing they didn't get was a true point guard, but Bryce Hopkins, an all-league player in the league. They beat out Georgetown for him. The Shannon kid can shoot the hell out of the ball. He'll play the three. Ian Jackson, obviously an electric guard we saw at Carolina. And then Sellers from Stanford also shoots it. So you got two shooters, and Rick Pitino had no shooters a year ago. So he's got the perfect mix. And then he gets Dylan Mitchell today, to back up Subi or to back up the 4 and the 5. So I just think what they did was absolutely remarkable. They got the money to be able to do it, but I think they put together a team that can win a national title next year if, and it's a big if the point guard play, and they're not done. They're going to get a mid-major. I said this in the show the other day. They're going to end up getting, a guy like a Dylan Darling type who's transferring from Idaho State, a good mid-major point guard.
Mm-hmm. So that's my biggest issue right now. I actually have St. John's 8th on my list, and I don't know if that's something where I wanted them a little bit lower. And the reason that I say that is the way that the roster is currently constructed. I think that it's an arguable that they did a really good job in the portal, right? Getting Ian Jackson is a big win. Getting Sanan is a big win. Getting Bryce Hopkins is a win. Getting Zuby back is probably the biggest win that they had during this whole portal process, right? They lost RJ Lewis, probably to the NBA, potentially to a transfer, but I would make the argument bringing in Dylan Mitchell is bringing in a guy that can do a lot of the same things that RJ Lewis is capable of doing. My biggest concern is that they don't have a point guard right now, and they don't really have all that much depth. But let's talk about the point guard situation, because the way that it's being phrased is that Ian Jackson is going to step in and be the guy that takes over at the point, right? Well, him and Sanan combined for 60 assists and 83 turnovers last year. I mean, you got two guys that are supposed to be the ball handlers there that are players that
not going to be a ball. Sanan's
I get that, but still, Ian Jackson is a guy that had a negative turnover ratio, average less than 1 assist per game. So that is the point guard situation that they currently have. And then the guy that they spent the big money on, Bryce Hopkins, really hasn't played in 2 years. So I think that they did a good job, but I would have them ranked lower than teams like Kentucky, who I thought built a roster that makes a lot of sense when it's put together. Then someone like Purdue, who was able to keep Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Wren from entering the portal and was able to go out and fill a couple of the holes that they had with Liam Murphy and Oscar Clough. I would have Louisville above them. I would make the argument that you could put UConn above them for going out and getting Silas Demery, who, by the way, along with Xavier and Lee, were point guards that passed on that St. John's situation. So I just, until St. John's gets a point guard, it's hard for me to make them be a top 5, top 6 team in the portal this year. And the other thing that I did, and maybe I took this a little bit differently than you did when you put together your list, but I ranked teams that were able to keep players from leaving as much higher than maybe what some of the teams that you could recruit. Because I think that you can make the argument, Texas Tech getting JT Toppin back and preventing him from going pro or entering the portal was much bigger than any of the wins and any of the pickups that any of these teams made. Same thing with Zuby coming back. That's probably the biggest addition that St. John's had, assuming because so it's just the way that I kind of
RJ Lewis. Last I checked, RJ Lewis wasn't playing in the most important minutes of the entire season. I don't think they were that upset that he went to the NBA and didn't come back. So I just feel like, again, you give Rick Pitino, and they're going to have a plan B. It's not just going to be Ian Jackson at the point, and there's no plan B here. Again, they're going to have, whether it's a kid Lamar Washington at Pacific, whether it's this kid Dylan Darling. And if you have those guys, and around them, Rob, you have Ian Jackson maybe coming off the bench or whatever, have him at the 2, have Sellers at the 3 or Stanton at the 3, Hopkins at the 4, Zuby at the 5, Dylan Mitchell coming off the bench. Who's going to have more talent than that group? And oh, by the way, not just who's going to have more talent. Who's the best coach in the country? Not Dan Hurley. It's Rick Pitino.
Well, I'm not arguing that point about Rick Pitino. Like, obviously, he's a Hall of Famer and one of the great. I would make the argument the greatest to ever do it. I know that riles up Duke fans and riles up
He's up
Coach
there.
K fans, but
Yeah.
but I think you can make a strong argument that Rick Pitino is the best to do it, at least in the modern era. So that's certainly true. But we're talking about like putting together. This isn't ranking teams for who we think is going to win. This is the portal class and what you did in the transfer window.
But
And I think that
all those guys came in the portal. Everybody I mentioned, other than, again, you're telling me keeping players is important. That's a part of it. I didn't really count that. I didn't really count Zuby. I'm taking Zuby out of the equation, and I'm still saying, look at what they got. Look, they got a lot of.
They got a dude at every position, but the best player that they have is still the guy that they're bringing back, and they're banking on right now. And maybe this will change because they go out and they get a mid-major point guard that can come in and have some kind of impact. But they're banking on right now a guy that's not a point guard playing the point. You always, what's your thing? Point guard play, point guard play, point guard play, point guard play, point guard play.
No
right?
question.
And
I have confidence they're going to get another guy, Rob. That's all I'll say is I have confidence they're going to get another guy who can just run the team with 4 dudes around him.
Yeah, no, I think that I would have St. John's as a preseason top 6, top 7 team for a reason. All right, let's look at some of the biggest losers that we have on the list here as well. Actually, no, before we do that, I want to roll through my biggest winners list and just kind of.
But what about Iowa? How are we not talking about Iowa? They're in both of our top 3. They're the only team. Well, I have Kentucky at 2. So Kentucky and Iowa are the 2 teams that we really agree on here. Kentucky, and there was a report that came out yesterday, Rob, about Kentucky's payroll, $20 million. I think David Sisk put it, right? Was it Sisk who put it out? Somebody, I don't know where it came from, but that number's, I've been told by a few sources here, that number's not that far off. It might be closer to 17 at the end of the day. It could go to 22. Obviously, they already lost Travis Perry. He went to the portal, so that cut it down a bit, not a ton, but a little bit. But it's somewhere in that 17 to 20, $22 million range. And that is an astronomical, insane number when you look at it. It's like what we used to talk about, with the New York Yankees, right? And you look at those, the Yankees and the Kansas City Royals and be like, how the hell can the Royals compete with the Yankees? And now it's, how the hell can anybody compete? Because that number is going to be double. It's going to be either almost or more than double most of the other, even of the other teams that are from 5 to 20 in the country. Because we've said there's going to be about 20 teams in the country, according to my sources, that are going to be in the $10 million range. Okay, 10 or more. Well, that's double all those teams. I mean, that's how far ahead Kentucky is right now. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I would absolutely have Kentucky as the biggest winner of the portal cycle. I had Purdue number 2, Iowa 3, Louisville 4, UConn 5, Auburn 6, Texas Tech 7, St. John's 8th, Washington 9th, and Indiana 10th.